This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 119 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we have some really interesting stories, I think. They're all about life-altering travel moments. You know how sometimes just one moment on your trip or a particular trip can really change something significant in your life. It can change relationships or change the entire trajectory of your life. That's what these stories are about today. And I find them personally really fascinating. It's funny how travel can be so life-altering. But before we get to them, let me just quickly mention the sponsor of this week's episode, which is my very own and my beloved Travel Journal School. So there is for January 2019, depending on when you're listening to this, there is going to be a new Travel Journal School course running. It's called No More Boring Travel Diaries. So if you, like me, have a history of writing a travel diary or journal as you travel, and maybe discovering later that it's very boring and bogged down in, tedious detail, or that you abandon it halfway through your trip because so boring, then this course is for you. It's really fun. It just runs over 3 weeks during January with 6 lessons. They're about things like using all your senses, looking at the details, but the right details, thinking about your unique story, getting rid of cliches, using humour, using emotion, that kind of stuff. It is heaps of fun. I haven't run it online for, I think a couple of years now. I just ran part of it in a face-to-face version here in Perth last weekend, I think it was. Anyway, it was awesome fun. So do head over to traveljournalschool.com and you'll see that the featured course there is No More Boring Travel Diaries. And if you are listening to this at the end of November, early December, you might be just in time to get the 20% early bird discount. Just have a go using the early 20, that's 20 in numerals, early 20 discount code. There's a couple of choices of currencies depending on where you are in the world. So just pick yours and use early 20 and you should be able to grab that discount if you are in time. Just message me if you have any questions about that. But I've already had a few sign-ups, and I know some of them are podcast listeners. So big shout out to you guys, and can't wait to have you in Travel Journal School in January. So back to the topic of life-altering travel moments, and I was trying to think, for me, what were the most life-altering travel moments? I mean, I think travel has changed my life in nearly every way, and it was really hard to narrow it down to tell you a kind of a brief story that's connected to that. But the one that sprang to mind was really not just one moment, but one trip, one stay. And that was living in Japan. So that's now, goodness me, it was in 2001 to 2003. I was 25 years old. And the thing about living and working in Japan, it was my first time teaching English. It was my first time living abroad. And I just feel like that experience changed I don't know, it sounds strange, but I really think it changed my personality so much while I lived and worked there. So it gave me this enormous new confidence. I learned to be good at small talk, partly through teaching and partly because of, the nature of Japanese people. You have to make them really comfortable so they'll speak English with you often because they're worried about making mistakes. Similarly, it made me kind of quite outgoing, much more outgoing and much more extroverted. I feel like travel shouldn't change your personality so extremely, but if I look at pre-Japan and post-Japan Amanda, I'm really a really different person. It's weird, hey? But I'm happy that it happened that way. I think it's changed so much about what I've done during the rest of my life. So yeah, that's my life-altering travel moment, or my life-altering travel stint in Japan. So I'm curious to hear about yours, and do come over to the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group and let me know how travel has changed your life. And let's hear from one of my guests now about how travel changed her life. So the first guest in today's episode is Natascha Mirosch, And she had, back about 20 years ago, a particularly life-altering moment in Greece, in fact, on a little-known Greek island named Skiros.
So it was 1998 and I was living in London at the time and I was a travel writer, and I had an assignment for a magazine called Dateline to go to this Greek island called Skiros, which everybody thinks they have heard of, but in fact nobody's ever been there because it's really annoying to get there. You have to either get a very small plane to the military airport from Athens, or you have to get 2 ferries, but it's not even from the main port Piraeus. You have to travel up north out of Athens to another port, get a ferry across to Evia, get a bus to the other side of Evia, get another ferry to Skiros. So it's not easy to get to.
Right. But
it was this kind of centre. It's called the Skiros Centre, and it's a place that you go to and you do there's writing workshops and there's kind of psychological workshops about releasing your inner child, and it was a little bit hippie trippy kind of thing. And I remember getting on the last ferry and just looking around me and going, oh my God, I'm so not going to fit in to this place. Everyone was, in their hippie clothes and everything. But I really, really enjoyed it. I had a really good time. I was there for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty full on. And then, and it's set in this most gorgeous, tiny little bay that backs onto a pine forest, and you have huts in the pine forest, and then you just, like, the water in front of you, I mean, you can just fall into the sea from your hut practically, sunbathe on the rocks, and it's so unusual for us to be able to just swim without one eye on safety, riptides and sharks and stuff, so swimming in the Mediterranean. So at the end of that 2 weeks, I was feeling very relaxed, and I didn't have a job to go to back in London at that time. I didn't have any other assignments, so I thought I might just stay a few more days. So I asked somebody locally, and they recommended a little taverna, and the lady who owned this taverna had actually been the cook at this place we were staying at and did some beautiful Greek food. So I went to her and I said, can I stay at your hotel and taverna? And she said, yes, of course. So I went. It was in another part of the island. It was on the beach. So I went there, and it was just idyllic. I think I paid £5 a night to stay there, probably including my meals. It was so cheap. And I had this fantastic time, and I met their son, Theo, and we had a bit of a flirtation, but nothing really happened. We'd just be drinking glasses of wine in the moonlight beside the sea, and it was quite romantic, but yeah, nothing happened. But I decided when it came, I stayed about a week, and I decided that when I came home, I was going to go via the little plane and the military airport instead of getting this 2 ferry, that took forever.
Right.
So on the designated day when the flight comes out off the island, I said goodbye to Theo and, let's keep in touch. And his father dropped me at the airport, which was basically like a little shed, except, you have to go through a checkpoint because it's a military airport and show your passport before you even get into the airport. So we're sitting in this little shed, and there comes this announcement saying, it's too windy to fly today.
Oh, no.
Come back next week. So I'm just
next week?
Shit. Yeah, I've got no money left at this stage, and I'm at this military airport in the middle of nowhere. So I just kind of go outside where all these people are milling around and said, can somebody take me? Can I get a lift with someone back to the village? So they said, yeah, sure, you can do that. So I went back, and I went to the taverna, and I threw myself at their mercy and said, I'll send you some money when I get home. I've got no money. And they were, of course, you stay. No problem. So in that fateful week, Theo and I became closer. And one very moonlit night, it happened. But we said goodbye at the end of that week, and I went home to London, and within probably 2 weeks, I knew I was pregnant.
Oh, dear me.
So my gorgeous son, who's now 19, is half Greek. We have been back to visit his father a couple of times on the island.
Oh, beautiful.
So that's probably the best holiday souvenir that I ever brought back with me.
Oh, that's so wonderful. And only because it was very windy that day.
Only because it was too windy to fly.
But for that weather, Natascha's life would have been so very different. I love that as a utterly life-altering travel moment. I'm really grateful to Natascha for telling me that fabulous story. So thank you. Now, my next guest is Talon Windwalker, and he has a story that actually also involves his child, but is a bit of a different angle. It's more like what I was talking about in the sense of a longer journey being very, very life-altering. But I'll let Talon tell you all about that.
I adopted my child as a single parent when she was 6.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't have those, bonding developmental years that a traditional family has from infancy and everything. And so, she had only been with me for a few years by the time we, left the States and went on this life of travel. So going from being in school and then going to daycare until I picked her up and then having the weekends together, going from that to being together 24/7, that was huge for not only for her development, but for our relationship, because we got to do all that bonding that, we didn't have otherwise. So that was really huge. And then of course, just the different experiences you have. I did, when we lived in Honduras, I became a scuba instructor, and she's a natural in the water and just loves diving and being in the water and all these things. And we, another island over, had a shark diving experience where it's near a reef shark creche. So they raise their babies in this area. So there's moms there like pretty much year round. And, reef sharks don't bother humans. So I thought this would be a really cool experience, because this wouldn't be, in a place where they chum the waters, and it wouldn't be the cage. And this is a safe kind of environment that's very natural, and where the sharks get a tiny bit of a snack, so they're still interested, but you get to spend some time with them just circling you. And for a child, they have a different depth limit for diving than adults.
Of course.
And unfortunately, the shark experience is deeper than what her allowable depth was as a child. And she was very distraught that she wasn't going to be able to go dark shark diving. Just kind of cracking up, because how many children cry because they can't go shark diving?
Yeah, not many.
That's ours. That's my family. And so I thought, you know what? I'm just going to talk to them. I'm an instructor, and maybe they'll be cool with me just taking responsibility. And so I talked to them and said, here's the deal. Here's my kid. They're really pretty solid in the water. And I've taken her just on some dives that we did. I went ahead and took her down to that depth just to make sure she could handle it and everything. And I said, I'm not concerned. I'm happy to sign any waivers or whatever. And they said, yeah, it's not a problem. We'll call it, parental judgment. And you're an instructor, as long as you're dive buddy, we don't care. I'm like, all right. So
awesome.
That was, it was pretty awesome. So we went to, and we actually did that. We celebrate 2 holidays in addition. Every year we celebrate the anniversary of the day she moved in with me, and the anniversary of when the adoption was finalized. And that's our Forever Day. And that was our Forever Day activity. So we got,
wow.
Yeah. And it was very cool, not only just for the experience of the sharks, but they're not used to seeing someone her size in the water. And so they were quite fascinated by her. And they, each time they went in the circle, they kept getting a little closer, a little closer. And as you looked into their eyes, you could feel their intelligence, and you could see their grace, and you could tell they were really fascinated by the small human. And so she kept, they kept circling to get a little closer. And at one point, I'm just like, okay, I know you don't attack humans. but you're making me nervous now.
So just getting a little bit close.
Yeah, so I just moved a little closer to her, and the shark backed off a little bit. So I was like, all right, we're good. That distance I'm comfortable with. But, that happened, oh gosh, what, 7 years now? And it still is one of my most favorite memories of doing stuff. It was just, such an incredible experience to see these sharks get that close and get to feel that from them. But also it was interesting. We had also had other times where while we were diving or out on the boat to go diving, we would come across a bunch of wild dolphins. And often the dolphins are pretty cool with seeing humans in the water. So whenever that happens, the boat will stop. And if they hang around, you get to get in the water and have, this experience of being with these wild dolphins. And when she got in there, it was the same thing. They could tell she was younger, smaller. And so the dolphins were very fascinating to her. And there was a couple that had little calves with them, and they brought their babies over to show her.
Oh.
And, so those kind of moments those are irreplaceable. You just can't get better than that.
I think this is a great story from Talon, and the story of the shark diving on their forever day is just a beautiful one. But I do also really relate to how much bonding you can do with your child when you travel. Of course, I also travel alone with my son, and, we're already pretty bonded. He's been with me since he was a tiny, screaming baby from the moment of birth. But just the same, those moments when we travel together are really special for, that, really close kind of parent and child bonding. And as he gets older, he's 8.5 now. Often at home, he's more interested in, hanging out with his friends, and, he spends a fair bit of time at school. And I always really look forward to the moments when we're traveling together, because then, a lot of the time it's just me and him, or, we're doing something really special together. And it's quite a different experience to being at home. And I think, really important. And I love to do it over and over again. Anyway, my final guest today is Kate Toon, who has a quick story about another kind of life-altering travel moment. It actually altered, her friend's life and hers quite quickly and completely.
Well, I guess I was 24. I was traveling in Thailand with my friend Sarah, and we'd planned to do the whole Asia thing, coming from England, backpacking around Asia, Vietnam, Thailand. But about 2 weeks in, we went to Koh Chang, it was an island called Koh Chang, and we went out in the phosphorus water at night. Phosphorescent. Phosphorus would probably have dissolved our legs, wouldn't it? And lots of Mekong whiskey was drunk, and then she disappeared. And the next morning, she came walking along the beach, hand in hand with a handsome Thai man, and said, "I've met this person called Bang," which I thought was rather apt, "and I'm not leaving. I'm staying here with him. I'm going to stay on this island with him."
Wow.
So I know. And I was like, "You sure?" And there was lots of debate. But then, she stayed, and I sailed away on a boat. And I really didn't want to do traveling on my own at that point. I was a bit of a wuss. I'd never been outside England really much before that. So I gave it all up and came straight to Australia. And a week later, got a job at Ogilvy and became a digital marketer person. And that was that.
No way.
So, I know. And she stayed with Bang for many years. She became a teacher at school, and they opened a restaurant together. Ultimately, it didn't work out. But that was a life-changing moment.
For both of you?
For both of us, indeed.
Goodness me. If you had met some handsome Thai man, would you have done the same thing?
Who knows? At 24, you'll do pretty much anything, especially when you've had too much Mekong whiskey. But yes, I don't know. Maybe, probably. Yes.
That's very exciting. I think I need more than one night to decide to change my life.
Well, it must have been, by name and by nature. I don't know.
Yes. I'm glad they stayed together for some time, though. That makes me feel better about the whole situation.
Exactly. Me too.
Well, it seems to me that Kate's friend Sarah made an enormously life-altering decision one night in Thailand It's not the kind of decision I would make, but I'm glad she did, because it turned out that that's why Kate came to Australia, became a digital marketer, and she's been really important in a lot of the learning I've done about business, and she's just an awesome person. So I'm pretty glad that that worked out. But I don't think I could have changed my life at a whim like that, even at the younger age of 24. Don't think I could have done it, but it makes a good story. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to episode 119 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. If you have a life-altering travel moment, hop over to our Facebook group at Thoughtful Travellers and tell me all about it. I love those kind of stories. There'll be a link in the show notes to the Facebook group, or you can just search for Thoughtful Travellers on Facebook and ask to join. The show notes for this episode will be at notaballerina.com/119 for episode 119. And just a few important links. Don't forget to check out Travel Journal School with my course coming in January, No More Boring Travel Diaries. If you just go to traveljournalschool.com, you will find it there. And don't forget, you can get a discount of 20% if you sign up this week with the early 20 coupon code. Thank you very much to all my wonderful guests. First up, I chatted again with Natascha Mirosch, and you can find her at nataschamirosch.com, or as you're a podcast listener, you might prefer to listen to her instead of read her, and you can do that at her Extra Virgin podcast, which has some great new episodes out. After Natascha, I chatted with Talon Windwalker. You can find Talon on his website, onedadonekid.com. The ones are numerals. And you can also find Talon on Instagram also at onedadonekid, but one the word for the dad. Let me explain. ONEDAD, numeral 1 kid. Also a link in the show notes, of course, but worth looking up. And last but very far from least, I chatted again with the delightful Kate Toon. You can find out all about Kate at her website, katetoon.com. But particularly if you are in business of any kind, Kate has not 1, not 2, but 3 podcasts, overachiever, and you can find her on the Hot Copy podcast, the Recipe for SEO Success podcast, and the Confessions of a Misfit Entrepreneur podcast. Finally, a reminder, come and check us out at the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group, and I will chat with you there. Thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.